Every month I create a new dungeon adventure for my Patreon, and after 10 months of making these dungeons, I finally feel like I'm starting to get the hang of it. So this month I'm taking a break from writing adventures that you can run, and instead I'm creating a guidebook that explains my process so you can create your very own dungeons. It's called Flick Silverpen's Guide to Exploring Dungeons. So for this video, I thought it'd be fun to run through my process and using this month's Patreon zine, create a dungeon from scratch. And I think I'm also going to draw it too. So this guide is actually pretty simple. There's 13 questions with a little bit of guidance and random tables for you to roll on for inspiration. And the whole idea behind it is if you can answer these 13 questions, or even most of these 13 questions, you'll come away with a really strong concept for a dungeon that you could sit down and run at the table right there. So it starts off broad, like, where is this dungeon located? And it gets more specific as you go through the guide with questions like, what's something the players didn't expect to find within the dungeon? If you don't have an immediate answer to the question, that's okay. I'm including a bunch of 2d6 tables that are a very fun way to get inspired. I haven't laid out the book yet, so these are all unedited tables you're seeing here. Now, instead of just answering these questions myself, I'm going to roll on each of the random tables to find out the answers. The fun part is seeing how the results bump up against each other and interact. You know, like, how does the answer to who lives in the dungeon relate to how is the dungeon defended? So I'm rolling two 6-sided dice. The first die picks the column, the second one picks the results in that column. And if I don't feel inspired by the answer I get, I just flip the results. You know, this isn't rolling to see what the consequences are in the games. There's no rules here. This is just meant to be a way to help you imagine something cool. It's not meant to feel like a struggle to come up with something fun. So if neither of the result works, just re-roll, get wild. It only takes a couple minutes to roll up the list of answers, and then comes the fun part. Based on the answers to these questions, I start to make connections. How are these flower people being manipulated? What's going on in the vault? There's probably some gold down there. What's glowing? Maybe it's the master, maybe it's the lake. Just let your imagination go crazy, and it's amazing how fast a story will start to form in your head. Now, I'll explain what I came up with in a minute, but it's safe to say that rolling randomly like this has helped me come up with an adventure that I never would have thought up on my own. And once I have a clear concept for this place, it's super easy to come up with reasons for players to want to go there. After that, I put a list together of the people or the creatures that the players might encounter. And then I also make a list of the rooms of this dungeon. You got to make sure that the dungeon makes sense story-wise and gives places for all of your NPCs to hang out. Okay, now it's time to sketch out a loose map. And this is really crude. It's just rooms with doors and hallways. I'm not focused on the drawing at all here. It's just planning. I'll go through my list and make sure that each room is labeled. And with this loose map drawn, I could pretty much run this adventure from the table. I'll still need to come up with some names and stat blocks and stuff, but other than that, I've got a good grasp on the concept, the tone, and now the layout of the dungeon, so I'm ready to run. Okay, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to draw a cooler looking map, and I'll be using this 1/4-inch non-photo blue grid paper. It's 11 by 17, but I'm cutting it down to 8.5 by 11. And to draw the map, I'll be using my favorite pens, microns. I've got a range from 0.02 up to 0.8 millimeter. I'm using Sigma microns and also Faber-Castell Pitt artist pens. They're pretty much the same. Even though the pens look different, the tips, the actual pen that you're drawing with feels pretty much the same. So I've actually started by sketching the dungeon onto the grid paper with pencil, just so I'm sure I have the layout drawn exactly how I want. I'm basically like cleaning up my loose map that I've already made and fitting it onto the grid. And after that, I'm ready to start drawing for real. So I jump in with the biggest, fattest micron and start drawing the borders of this map. And as I go, I'll drop down a size for doors and numbers, and then onto the smallest size, the 0.02 for the grid that I'm redrawing later. Basically, the less important the detail, the smaller the pen size gets. Now, I think I'm actually going to leave this map pretty much blank because I'm really excited with the concept that I came up with, and I think I might actually run this adventure adventure, or even turn it into an adventure for the Patreon at some point in the future. So let's talk about the actual story of this place that I rolled up from answering these 13 questions. So the dungeon is a castle on a lake. The master of the castle is a prince that used some sort of ancient magic to turn everyone in the castle into strange flower monsters. He's killed the king and queen and sieged the throne away from his sister. And the village around the castle is concerned because the lake has been contaminated by these magic flowers and it's now glowing. So maybe it's attracting giant insects, or it's mutating the fish that the villagers catch in the lake and use for trade and food. And that's where the players come in. The village needs your help. The castle is guarded by former knights that have been infected with the flowers, so no one has been able to enter the castle. And even if you could get in, the courtyard has been turned into this dangerous jungle of poisonous flowers. Inside the castle, everyone has been turned into flower zombies, and the prince has this vicious mutated guard dog. There's another adventurer inside who's barricaded themselves inside the chapel. They're trying to find some way to stop the prince and cure the poison because they've recently been infected. And even though the prince used this flower magic on his parents, the king and queen, it's not all bad. He didn't have the heart to flowerify his sister. So the secret is she's locked down in the castle vault with a bunch of gold. So there's still hope of saving the lake and the kingdom and maybe scoring a hefty reward for doing so. So it's up to the players to explore the castle. Maybe they can get through a secret entrance via the lake, figure out how to destroy all these flowers and return the castle and the lake to normal, and hopefully not die in the process. So I think I'll probably call this adventure something like The Siege of Castle Bloom, or maybe The Blooming Usurper. I don't know. I gotta think of a cool title. Okay, so I ended up using some Copic markers to color in the map just to make it a little more interesting looking. Without the color, this map took me a little over 20 minutes to draw, and most of that was refilling in the grid. So I think if you're looking to create a map for your virtual tabletop or something to throw down for your players to reference at the table, this sort of clean, bare bones map is perfect. Now, if I turn this into an actual adventure, I would probably have a little bit more fun with it and add a bunch of details to all the rooms and stuff, but we'll save that for another video. If you're interested in getting your hands on my guide to creating dungeons, head over to my Patreon that's linked down in the description. Flicksilverpin's Guide to Exploring Dungeons will be out by the end of the month. It's going to be fully illustrated and super helpful. Hopefully this video has showed off how easy it is to create a fun dungeon in less than an hour using these random tables and this guide. Let me know what you think of the Bloom Usurper dungeon down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!